In the world of video games, where games launch broken, where developers promise a lot and deliver on half that, or when they say they're gonna fix it, but they hardly ever, No Man's Sky may be the exception. It may be gaming's greatest redemption story. What do I mean about that? Well, I'm gonna go further into that, but first, like, comment, and subscribe, all the normal YouTube stuff. Tell me, are you a fan down below? Are you not a fan? And do you even still care about No Man's Sky, even if I think it has redeemed itself? To go through the history of No Man's Sky would be tedious, boring, and repetitive. By now, everyone knows it. It was a game that promised a lot, and when it launched, it delivered on almost none of those promises. It was developed by Hello Games and released in 2016. This is quite important. And when the game launched, there was a lot of vitriol. Many people hated it, many people bashed it, there was thousands of YouTube videos, blah 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 blah. Hello Games could have done one thing here. They could have rested on their laurels, threw the game away, and said, well, it sucked, it failed. But they didn't do that. Instead, they had a plan, a mission to deliver the game that they wanted to launch all those years back. So they went back into the development hole and decided to do exactly that, deliver the game that they promised. And now, it's been 7 years, 20 major updates, and the game is completely unrecognizable from its launch counterpart. You could say the game has redeemed itself. So let's wind it all back. After they go back into their little hole of quietness, they go and release their first update in November that year, called the Founders Update. A game that had nothing to do became a game that would start to have nearly everything to do. So much so that it can be even overwhelming for a new player. And seriously, the amount of times they release an update is pretty crazy. Yes, there'll be smaller patch updates here and there and some visual enhancements and fixing some bugs, but there will always be them working in the background to release something big. From adding in bases to buildings, to adding in freighters and making them your bases, to overhauling both combat on foot and in your ship, to adding in multiplayer, a multiplayer hub, multiplayer missions, and expeditions, a completely different way where you can play for the multiplayer and get rewards that you can use in your main save, to gaining settlements, to having pets, to building vehicles and having a mech. There is so much to do in No Man's Sky that you wouldn't say at all that it's the same game. Now, here's a bit of history with me. I wasn't a fan of No Man's Sky. I wasn't into the hype that was No Man's Sky. I just thought of it as another game. I only really bought it after it got its first major update, which was the Founders Update, which included base building, and I got it for a very cheap price. Picked it up, and I found it was kind of relaxing. It was smooth. It was something I just liked about it. I liked the solo traveling of going from planet to planet and finding something new and cool and unique. And since then, I've been hooked. And since then, they've added so much to the game that it isn't even the same game anymore from that Founders Update. From being able to build bases you nearly want to working with friends to build stupid bases, to having a farm, to destroying the terrain and building the terrain, to finally getting freighters and increasing your inventory, which is something I thought wasn't going to happen, but they did. To changing multi-tools, to changing how planets work, how space looks, materials are used. It is truly amazing. And look, I have to give props where props is due. Hello Games has done what it wanted to do. Get to the game that they wanted to release all those years ago. And I do think they've done it. The game that is now playable and has all these updates is kind of what probably they were closer to the original goal of what No Man's Sky was supposed to be. And yes, you gotta say that they shouldn't have had Sean Murray go on there and have somebody that can't say no and make a lot of promises be thrown into the deep end and do a lot of public speaking. It's why you don't get you have to give developers a script. You always have to give them a script. Because the moment you don't is the moment you get what happened with No Man's Sky. But in a place where we have to spend money to get upgrades to new consoles, spend money for new enhanced editions, DLCs, season passes, and season pass 2s, because you can't have any more just one more season pass, you gotta have 2 now. All of these updates are completely free. That's right, you can go right now and find a copy of your No Man's Sky that's lying around, or a secondhand copy, updated, and you will have everything that I've been talking about and more, because there's so many updates. I probably can't even talk about all the updates that they've done. Trying to put all of that in one video is tiring, but completely free is amazing. I mean, we have games launching nowadays completely broken. And the first thing people that have played No Man's Sky, they could turn around and say, well, maybe they can do a No Man's Sky, which is actually a compliment, because you want your developers to care for the game. You want your developers to try to make the game that they promised. You don't want your developers to just up and leave. And in a place where we are right now, where there are live service games being released almost every other month, with them not even being able to last a year before shutting down, and AAA companies just having developers release games completely broken, it's kind of refreshing to have a developer who's willing to do a lot with their game and willing to deliver constantly, and sometimes even over-delivering with their updates. I mean, these are updates that are game-changing. These are updates that sometimes feel like DLC. Like, these are updates that they would sell to us for DLC and say, well, now you got to pay for this update that's very important if you want to have these underwater bases. But there's none of that. Not a single amount of microtransactions in this game. Sure, they may use real time, but there's no microtransactions at all in this game. You can't get any real money thrown into this game to buy anything fake, which I think is a credit on their end. I've loved No Man's Sky ever since I've bought it, and every single time there's new major updates, I'm jumping right into it. Now, is it a perfect game? No. There are still bugs that issue it from the day I bought it. There's still bugs whenever a new update comes in. There's a lot of bugs that mess it up. Then, of course, it's still very much of a niche title in my opinion. Some people still don't care for simulation games, don't care for crafting. But they have added in modes that change that, like relaxed mode, a balanced mode. They've added in a permadeath mode if you want that survival challenge, which I think is really, really great. They've added in expeditions where you can play to get like rewards. Even though there are still issues with this game, and it does feel like a game that was released 7 years ago in 2016, I still really, really love it. The question I throw to you guys now is, what do you think of the future of No Man's Sky? Where do you think Hello Games goes? Because on the one end, they've poured everything into this game. They've poured their heart and soul. They've had death threats thrown at them, bomb threats when this game came out. And they've managed to stick with it. And dare I say, even with the updates that weren't very great, they were always working in the background to create something that the community has either asked for, or they've created something that we never thought we wanted, and then we got. So I don't know where they're going to go. Hello Games are not a developer that really speaks a lot to the community. They listen, but they won't really speak a lot, and I can kind of understand why, because I mean, they got burnt many, many times over this game, and when it launched, it was just a whole shit show. So, where do they go? Do they stick with No Man's Sky? Because as much as like I said, I like this game, it does feel like a game that was released in 2016. It feels like some of the mechanics could just be a bit smoother and just play a bit much more like accessible. It's not as it's very accessible considering there are other games out there that just aren't that accessible, like Elite Dangerous and Star Citizen. Those games are just so non-accessible, and you have to really play a lot to get into it. Where this game is pretty successful within its first like couple of hours once you start to figure it out. And the tutorial is great. It's not the best tutorial, but it gets you going, and you gotta just find the rest of the stuff out yourself, which I think is actually quite fun in this game. So do they do a No Man's Sky 2? Should they do a No Man's Sky 2? Should they take everything that they've learned and maybe try to go in a completely different direction, or make a spiritual successor? I don't know how I feel. On the one hand, even though I love No Man's Sky, maybe its time has come to maybe move on. I wouldn't mind some of the mechanics and some of the systems to just be a little smoother and a little bit easier to use. I would love some of the bugs to be out. So I can't believe and I can't see what they're going to do. But I will know I will be there day one. And even if that game does release broken, I know that they at least they're going to try and everything to fix it. So that's my video on No Man's Sky. If you like it, comment down below, like, subscribe, and you gotta do all that YouTube stuff. And tell me, do you want No Man's Sky 2? Or do you want them to add stuff into this game? Do you want them to continue making this game? And what do you think they should add? I got no idea. I think they've added in basically almost everything I've always had thoughts for. Maybe some extra base stuff, because I haven't added in a lot of cool base stuff in a long time. So Maybe some of that would be really cool. I don't know. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video.